Hi, hello everyone. Good morning if you're here in the US. Thank you so much for joining us for Oolite Collect. My name is Donnamarie Baptiste, and I am an arts administrator, cultural producer, and a strategist, currently focusing on arts and culture and impact investing. I'm currently a proud board member of Oolite Arts, and I am a passionate lover of drawings and works on paper. So I'm really excited to have this conversation today with our special guests, Rosemary Cromwell and Sylvia Manrique. I'd like to introduce our speakers, and thank you both for being here. Rosemary Cromwell is a photographer whose work explores the effects of globalization and the tenuous space between the political and the spiritual. Her first book, El Libro Supremo de la Suerte, was published in 2018 by TIS Books and was awarded the Light Workbook Photo Prize, named one of the 25 best photo books of 2018 by Time Magazine. She has had solo exhibitions at Diablo Rosso Gallery and Antithesis Gallery, both in Panama City, Panama. Her work has also been exhibited at Aperture Foundation in New York, Prism Art Fair in Miami, the Philadelphia Photo Art Center, and the Silver Eye Arts Center in Pittsburgh, among many others. Cromwell is a recipient of a Fulbright grant, a Getty Reportage grant, Oolite Creator Award, and was a Light Work Award artist in residence. Sylvia Manrique is the collections manager and conservator at the Wolfsonian-FIU Museum in Miami Beach, Florida, where she is responsible for the care and organization of 180,000 plus objects in the collection. She received an MA in conservation from the Polytechnic University of Valencia, Spain, and a BA in conservation from the National College of Conservation and Restoration in Mexico. She has over 15 years of experience in treatment, preventative care, housing, framing, exhibition installations, and moving projects of small and large collections. She previously served as the collections manager and conservator at Utah Museum of Fine Arts and completed conservation projects at the, in my French, Institut Royal du Patrimoine Artistique in Belgium, the Valencia Institute of Conservation in Spain, and in several cultural institutions in Mexico. Please welcome our guests, and I'm excited to hear you both speak today. We're going to start with Rosemary Cromwell, who's going to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her work.
Thank you, Donnamarie, for the introduction, and thanks to Oolite for having us all here today. I wanted to just speak a little bit about my experience with preserving my works and also other photographers' works that I've worked with before in the past. So like Donnamarie said in my introduction, I have published one book, and I also have had exhibitions of work. So I'm primarily concerned about taking care of my archive of books that I have, as not only my own, but also other rare and collectible books that I have collected over the years. It's a small but valuable collection, mainly because I have bought things that I really liked, and then they go up in value over the years. And also, a lot of my prints are quite large, 40 by 50 inches, and to mount something like that size in the Caribbean, in the tropics, and to keep it from warping is something you have to really consider before you do so. So these are the areas that I've worked in. In addition to my own archive, I also, when I was living in Panama for a number of years, worked on organizing and preserving the large archive of the Panamanian photographer Sandra Aleta, whose negatives dated back to the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and had been stored in humid climates for the past 40 years. And I also was a darkroom printer for her, and wanted to ensure that the prints I made would last, decades into the future. I look forward to answering some questions about these different things and speaking more to Sylvia and Donnamarie. So I think Sylvia is now going to give us a little bit of an introduction into her work.
Thank you very much, Rosemary, and thank you, Oolite, for letting me participate in this panel. I am a conservator who trained in Mexico and Spain. My expertise is in antique artwork. I studied in my master's degree in Spain, and then I did a long year internship in the Institute of Cultural Heritage in Belgium. In between those things, I worked at the Utah Museum of Fine Arts, where I was in charge of the collection's care of about 20,000 works that included paintings, sculptures, works on paper, books. But then after I did my, I worked there for 7 years. And after going to my master's and coming back to the US in Miami, I started working at the Wolfsonian Museum, where I am currently in charge of the 200,000 objects that are in our collection. I say 180 before, but it has grown. The collection's pretty big. And among the projects that I have to participate in are like our library that involves around 100,000 books. And also we have over 30,000 works on paper, ranging from small format to very large posters. We have photographs, we have prints of different media, works on paper like drawings and paintings too. So it's my responsibility to ensure that they are well preserved for the future, not only for now. So it's part of my everyday job. So I'm very happy to respond to some of the questions that you may have about your own collections, no matter the size that they are. So to start with this conversation, I would like to go very quickly on talking to you about some of the issues that you might encounter if you are living in South Florida, because we know that the humidity and temperature here is pretty high, and it's a challenge for works on paper. So I'm just going to go over that issue, but some others that you might encounter here or anywhere you are. So one of the issues of humidity is the dimensional change that you will encounter on your works on paper. If the paper were to be loose, it would be fine, but usually we have it framed. So when it grows in size with the humidity, then you have a lot of wrinkles. On the image on the right, you can see that this paper was glued down. It wasn't glued down uniformly. So when the humidity makes it grow in size, then you have all these creases and folds because the paper doesn't have space to move around. So besides the humidity, you have an issue with the way we frame things. The next issue that you can find, obviously, is mold that probably we all have experience in South Florida. And mold, it grows really fast. If the temperature and the humidity conditions are correct, it can grow even in 3 days. So it is something that we have to be aware of. Another thing is like the dust will promote the growth of mold. And mold is not only a question of temperature and humidity, but it also of poor air circulation. If you have your air circulating properly in your space, your mold issue might be prevented, but it's something that to think about. So the next issue is that humidity also creates chemical degradation. For example, on the photograph on the left, you see like silver mirroring that is a result probably of high humidity, but also the materials that you may use in your framing or in your storage or in a photographic album, they also degrade at their own pace when they are encountered with humidity. So besides your own work, you have to worry about the materials that are around your artwork because they might damage your pieces by their own natural degradation. So the next thing that we have to think about is light. light causes the main issue, or one of the issues, is fading. If you see this watercolor on the left, there is a detail on the right, and you can see exactly where the mat was covering the watercolor, where this red line is. So you can see that the area that was covered by the mat is bright and shiny, while the rest is brown and dull. So probably this piece has changed quite a bit from what the artist intended, and that's a result of light damage. The next issue with light is also chemical degradation. When you see papers that are becoming yellow or brittle and discolored, it's probably a part of light damage. And light damage is irreversible. So some of these issues, while they can be treated, some of the damages cannot be reversed. So we have to be aware of the light that our artwork is receiving. Another problem is how we frame our artwork. For example, with acid materials, acidity is also something that promotes the brittleness of the paper and also the discoloration. But the discoloration represents chemical decay, and that's how our artworks start breaking down. So you can see around the edges of the images, all those yellow lines are from other materials that were placed on top of the paper. Acidity transfers from piece to piece. So if you have an acid paper and another that is not acid, it will transfer the acidity and damage it. So another thing, talking about framing, is contact tapes that are used to hang the artwork. Contact tapes are hard to remove, but also over time they decay too, and they transfer their acidity, and also the adhesive can penetrate the paper and damage it. Next one is storage. The way we store things also can be good for the artwork or can be damaging. One of the things that sometimes we do when we have large artworks on paper is folding them. But so you know, folds become tears over time. So anything that you fold will probably end up tearing in the future. So it's something that you should think about when you have your artwork stored. Try not to fold it ever. And also, as I mentioned before, poor quality materials. On the left is the album that we saw before. On the right is those yellow areas are the plastic that got stuck in the photograph that cannot be removed unless it goes under pretty extensive conservation treatment. So even though we took the plastic off, those pieces were stuck on the photograph. So that needs bigger repair. So finally, you know, like when we try to repair our own artwork, we sometimes use things that are not appropriate for the materials, and they might cause more damage in the future, like duct tape on paper, which will be very, very hard to remove without damaging the artwork. So we will try to avoid those. So remember, like you as a collector, when your artwork gets damaged, it changes the appearance, but also it can diminish their value. So it's something that we all have to deal with. So I hope for the safety of the artwork, but also for your own collection, we should try to avoid some of these things. And we are going to talk about it in this panel to help you out.
Oops. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sylvia. So the purpose of this talk, obviously, is to help collectors, emerging collectors, and artists as well, you know, whether it be working artists or budding artists, to learn more about the care of works on paper and to help you avoid issues down the road. As I'm excited about this because I love works on paper, because that was really my entry into buying artwork and starting to collect work. I've always loved drawings. I love drawings, and I love photography. But obviously I love painting as well. But I just always found that for me, it was easier to access works on paper. It was easier to buy, and not only monetarily, but just I felt a little bit more secure. So I always felt like it's a good entry point for people who may be interested in buying artwork to start with works on paper. So I'm excited to get the conversation started. I've got some questions for today's experts, and we're gonna get it moving. So let's go. I just answered my own first question, but I just wonder what you guys think about some good reasons to collect works on paper. I mean, Rose, because you collect books. Oh, this is another thing that when we talk about works on paper, can we talk about what that means? What some of those things are. I'd love to hear from both of you, because you both have such extensive and diverse areas. What are some works on paper that you've come across? The types of work, whether it be like drawings or manuscripts, etc.
Okay, I guess I'll start. I mean, in my case, it's very specific. I'm speaking about photographs, which, whether they're made in the darkroom or printed digitally, they're usually always on paper. There's obviously alternative ways to print photographs, or maybe on canvas. But usually photographs are on paper, as well as photographic books, which are also made of paper. And there's a lot of great reasons to collect photographs. For me, I try to make photographs that function maybe as a painting would. I want my viewer to be engaged. They're subjective images that I have, created. And I want them to have the same presence in the room that perhaps a painting would, the same aura. And, a lot of times with photography, at least in my case, my prints, are editioned, it's usually like editions of 5 plus 2 artist prints. And I think a lot of photographers who are taking their work seriously do edition their work. So their, photographic works on paper are valuable and don't, always exist in huge numbers. So, that I think is a reason multiple reasons to collect photographs. And as far as books, I mean, I love entering a book, spending that time and space with a book in your lap. And there's been some amazing, inspiring photographic books published over the years that are rare now, or the second edition comes out, but it's changed a little bit. So those are the kind of the unique aspects of photography books, especially if you're collecting older ones from the past, which, perhaps maybe wasn't made with archival glue, or the binding is falling apart. So one of my main things I like to recommend is everything has to be archival, but we can get into that a little bit more. Yeah.
Sylvia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I would add that works on paper, obviously, as it sounds, it includes anything that's based on paper, bound or not bound. Bound, like you say, like books or magazines too. If they're not bound, they could be drawings or watercolors that are paintings, or wash that are usually done on paper or also on paper board. You can add prints and anything like charcoal drawings, anything that is made out of papers, even contemporary papers that are a little bit more plastic might be considered works on paper. So all of those things, like I guess most people, or the majority of people who are here, will have a poster in their house, or a print, or a book, or a photograph, or a drawing that will be considered work on paper and that they will want to preserve for the future.
Great. So I was just thinking I was listening to what you guys were saying and thinking, just out of curiosity, like what's the most durable paper? Like, or paper media? Like if you're looking to buy, or if you're, as an artist, if you're looking to make something a lasting thing, what materials are the most durable? What paper materials are the most durable, would you say? Either of you, feel free to jump in.
I would say that cotton, materials of high quality, cotton papers that are 100% cotton are the most lasting because they have the least amount of impurities that will become acidic over time. There are many materials that people can use. If we take care of them, we can preserve mostly anything. I would say if you are an artist and you want to paint something, you should use color fast paints. Maybe they're a little bit more expensive, but the higher quality is usually representing color fastness or more stable media that will last longer. So as an artist, try to aim for materials that are high quality and light fast. As for collecting, artists use different kind of mixed media. Sometimes, like I encountered a very, very large painting on paper, and it was made with some dirt on it. So obviously, every time you manipulated that piece, the dirt will come off because of the way it was made. The dirt wasn't very well attached to the paper. So obviously, over time, there will be very little dirt left. But other than that, I would say that there are many kinds of artworks that will last a very long time. Photographs are very stable too, if kept in good condition. Books too. I would say things that are not quality that may have issues lasting are, for example, newspapers that are very acidic. And over time, even if you leave them one day out in the sun, they get super discolored. And it's not only the discoloration, but the acidity and the chemical breakdown. So I would say works on paper that are on cotton and inks, high quality inks will last longer. But anything can last if we take good care of it. So don't worry.
Okay, Rose, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Sure. I mean, I don't know. Definitely Sylvia knows more of the technical side of paper, but I think I definitely agree that, that the paper, at least that I print on, I'm pretty consistent. I know what paper lasts and I know what brands, I don't know exactly what's in them, but the brands that I use, like Canson paper for digital archival prints or Epson ink, these are things that, brands I trust to be quality. Printing in the darkroom, it was always on Ilford paper. There's not that many choices these days, but, and then also just making sure that if you're in the darkroom and creating prints, that you're doing the recommended fixing time, the washing time to get all of those chemicals out of the darkroom prints. And then also just, if you're making an artist book, just make sure that you're investigating what kind of paper and ink you're printing with. So that, things that maybe are, if you're making a quicker zine on newsprint, then you just maybe need to know that may change over time. And maybe that's inherent in the, part of making a zine perhaps. But so those are my recommendations as far as choosing materials, finding brands that you can trust.
I know that I think Arches paper, I've heard artists say that that's a brand that they trust. And I think Strathmore was what, Dennis would know this. Clifford Still, I think, used to use Strathmore paper. I'm always fascinated by the nerdy aspects of what artists choose and why. And so that's why this conversation is pretty fun for me. So it's interesting to hear your choices too, Rose, as an artist, what brands you find loyalty with. I see some questions coming in, so I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to just kind of look at the chat and see what we've got coming in. But I wanted to ask about obviously the most obvious thing is framing. getting into framing and thinking about, you know, I think when you're buying a work on paper as a collector or somebody who's an admirer of works, you don't think about the cost of framing when you know, unless you've been doing it for a while and you realize, oh, framing is so expensive. But it's important. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about why framing is so important, and so that people understand why it's so expensive, and can make the cost valuation there for themselves. Because if you think about that, you're getting a print or a work on paper for perhaps less cost than a painting, you do have to, there's an additional cost to frame that work, but the reasons why are what we're discussing here today, right? So Sylvia, you know, can we talk a little bit about framing and why it's so important?
Well, I would like Rosemary to respond this question before me, because she has a lot of experience on framing our work, and then I will add to her points.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, definitely it's something that it is intimidating for collectors, and I'm always happy to kind of step in and guide the framing process, just because I do have experience framing photographs, obviously. And it's important because, I mean, you don't want the print to get damaged. It's delicate. You want to have a way to put it on your wall. And so, at least with large photographs, and I think that maybe Sylvia can respond whether you can do this with other works on paper, but I always recommend, even for small photographs, to mount them on, and especially living in a humid climate, I recommend mounting them on Diabond, which is a metal, versus archival foam core, which, you know, is a little bit softer and over the years can warp a little bit. So it's like the saying, it's expensive to be cheap. I'm not sure if I'm quoting that correctly, but, you know, obviously foam core is less expensive, but in the end, it could be more expensive. So maybe the $100 extra that it costs to mount on Diabond, I would highly recommend that. And, you know, for smaller photographs, if you're matting them, definitely the matte board needs to be, as pure as possible, as archival as possible. Sometimes, I mean, maybe Sylvia can answer this, but, you know, in the past, we have taped photographs to matte board, but I know you can also have corners, and you want to also, you know, maybe paper corners are better than plastic corners because there's, you know, less impurities. So you want to think about how you're adhering the photograph or the print to the matte board. And usually, I mount my photographs and then I'll put them in frames and use spacers, because they're large, so they're too big for mats, and I'll use spacers to separate the photograph from the glass. And I do believe those can be archival too. You know, usually a high quality framer will know what you're talking about, but that is so that your photograph is not touching the glass all the time.
Right. So I would also recommend, mounting our work on foam board is not the best solution, because also it is acidic. The foam core, even the archival ones, degrade over time. So I would recommend, if you're not using like aluminum for your own photograph, like Rosemary, you can use archival matte board, which is 100% cotton matte board that you can find in any framery, or they can get it for you too, because it's pretty common. Rag mat or crescent or museum board is called. So you can mount your artwork on those papers, because they do not have acidity, or they have buffering that will relent the developing acidity on your artwork. You can talk to a framer, and as Rosemary mentioned, you want to have spacers in a way that your artwork doesn't touch the glass, because especially if you have high humidity, it's possible that, you know, sometimes the media can get stuck on the glass. or I forgot the pull-out forces that it can abrade your artwork. Also, when you are getting a frame, maybe you want to get a UV light filtering glass. It is a little bit more expensive, but it filters out 99% of the UV light that comes from the sun of the light sources, which will help your artwork to fade less or to become less yellow. Well, not become less yellow. It will prevent it from becoming yellow. So the glass needs to be UV filter. You can also add UV filter to your light sources, but if you're going to change your artwork, it's better that it accompanies the artwork. So glass that is UV filter, matte that is acid-free. You have to have space around your artwork so it is not against the sides or the top and the bottom of the frame in case with the humidity it changes size, so it has room to expand without being wrinkled. Those are the kind of things that you can talk to the framer. Also, you can consult with a conservator and to a professional framer about different ways of mounting it that doesn't require adhesives. Like Rosemary mentioned the corners, but there are many different ways to mount artwork that doesn't require adhesive or adhering the artwork directly into the mats. So that will be a good way to go.
Rosemary, is there a local framer who mounts to metal? Like, are there any places that you recommend?
That is a good question. I mean, all professional framers should mount to Dibond. It's not that uncommon for sure. It might be something that they need to pre-order in. You know, I have, since I've only been in Miami for about 4 years, I have used my framer in upstate New York, but I'm really looking for a local framer. And I recently, a client framed with a framer named Marcos, I believe his name is Chirlo, and he's in Alapata. I can put his information. I don't know if he has an actual business name, but I can put his information. We can put it in the chat afterwards. And I recently had a client that framed with him and was really, really happy with it. So as soon as I'm back in town, I'm going to be visiting him, and that's my recommendation at the moment.
And so I know we're gonna get to the questions. Just so everyone knows, we're gonna get to the questions in the chat. I'm gonna get all the questions, but I do see a really relevant one right now. So I'm just going to ask it from Maria Elena. Hi, Maria Elena. She says, I understood that mounting photos on aluminum was not recommended anymore from a conservation perspective. Is Dibond different?
Yeah, I mean, I believe so. You know, I don't know what exactly, I know it's metal. I don't know the exact properties of it, but it definitely is the preferred, it's of the museums that I'm working with a museum right now, and we're talking about different ways to mount prints, and that's their preferred method. Of a lot of my experienced collectors, it's also they won't buy a print, especially the ones that are based in the Caribbean won't buy a print unless it's on Dibond. So I'll have to figure out how it's different from aluminum. So sorry, I can't specifically answer that, but I do know it's trusted.
Awesome.
I haven't worked with that material. Mm-hmm. What I can say is that also when as an artist, you can decide how to mount your artwork. It might be a little bit different when you are collecting or trying to frame an artwork that is more antique, and where the artist is not around anymore, and where sometimes photographs are very resilient in the fact that usually they are mounted on rigid paper and they stand up better, but maybe there are works on paper that are thinner or more delicate that they won't stand the same mounting systems. So you have to take into account the condition of your artwork and also the material that it's made of to choose. Now, it might be a good material. As I say, I'm not familiar with it, but I would say that the other systems could work too, even in high humidity areas. Like I have worked in Central America and Mexico, and also here in South Florida. Rack mats and museum mat boards can work too, as well as other like aluminum or metal mounts if you keep them properly. So I would say, do not worry, you are not condemned to lose your artwork just because we are in a high humidity area. It's possible to keep them well in this environment if we take some measures.
What are some, so I'm thinking about looking at all the amazing questions that are coming in about framing, but I also want to talk about storage a little bit as well, because two things about storage. One is obviously we want all of your tips about storage for collectors, but also Rosemary, I'd love for you to address artists, studio, and Sylvia, you as well. You know, when you walk into artist studios, sometimes, you know, depending on the artist, there's just stuff everywhere and just stuff. And so when artists are in their studios, are there any things that they should be doing to care for their works on paper in particular? You know, as they're works in progress that aren't finished, and they may not be finished for 2 years and they're just sitting in the studio, you know, what are some things that they should be doing to ensure that the works, that the paper and the works are preserved in a meaningful way? And then I'd love to talk about, on the other side, as people who collect work, and I have stuff in storage that I haven't seen in a while, and now I'm really thinking about what, you know, I need to be looking for a better storage place, and what do I need to look for, and what should we be doing to make sure that our works are preserved. So I don't know how we can split that in two questions, but I'd love for both of you to just jump in and give your advice and thoughts and expertise around storage.
Sure. You know, here in Miami, we have, there's a lack of artist studio housing, and some of the buildings where we have artist studio buildings are, the conditions are less than optimal. And I believe that's going to be changing soon. Like, for example, I have a studio at Bakehouse Art Complex, and the next couple of years, we're going to be seeing a huge remodel of the space. And it's always been a concern of mine, you know, living in South Florida with hurricanes. So you just never know when the roof is going to leak or anything, you know, so what I have done while living here is rented a small unit from Museo Vault, which is located in Wynwood, which is I believe that most of the artistic institutions have used Museo Vault for hurricane storage and storage of artwork. And they do have, you know, smaller, affordable units that could be for single artists. And for me, it's where I keep my negative storage after experiencing a theft in a prior studio, that I just sleep better at night knowing that my out of print book, the few copies I have are in that storage unit, and that my negatives are there, and any important prints I also put there. But in my studio, thankfully at Bakehouse, we have a good air circulation and air conditioning. So that, I think, especially working in another artist archive in Panama, that was a major issue there, is that I had to advise her that she needed to have constant, or not constant air conditioning, because I know that's not environmentally friendly at all, but occasional air conditioning is better than none and helps to prevent mold. And also I just think about, I think flat files are really great for keeping prints. I mean, maybe separating prints with archival tissue paper is also, if they're not framed. And then just making sure your prints are wrapped safely, again, with maybe archival brown paper. And I think that there is, making sure that they're not leaning in a awkward way too would be maybe some other advice I would offer.
Right, that is sound advice, having them in an environment that with air circulation, as sometimes the humidity is inevitable, but if the air continues circulating, it is a good thing, because the temperature tends to be lower, but also because the air prevents the mold from staying in a place and then just developing there. So for example, sometimes when we leave for days, we turn everything off, including the AC. I would say if you're going to leave for a long period of time, try to leave the I don't know if you can schedule it in your AC to have it circulating somehow. If you can have some windows open, even though the artwork shouldn't be close to the windows, like you have to have air circulation. Also for storage, the flat file is great. You can, if you don't have a flat file, you can buy archival boxes, the Solander boxes that are, like probably 1.5 or up to 3 inches, even up to 6 inches long. You can store your artwork flat there. They are archival. You can keep them in a dry space that has good air circulation, that is not in the attic or in the kitchen or in the basement where the temperatures are extreme, or where you may have a leak. So don't use those spaces, but in, like maybe in a bedroom, in an office space, in the living room, where you can have a good air circulation and that it's clean and is not extreme in temperature, it's a good idea for small collections, or if you are keeping artwork in your own house. Obviously, storing it in a climate storage is the perfect solution. If you can do that, go ahead. If not, you can find good places in your own space.
I'm just checking the time here. I want to make sure that we get some of these questions in. I just want to shout out Dave. Hi, Dave, because Dave has got some great questions going in the chat. So we're gonna dive into some of Dave's questions, and then I think Rosa also has some really great questions. So let's start with one of Dave's questions, which I did ask one already. But he says, collectors frown on dry mounting works to frame them, but is it a good idea to do it considering our humidity?
I would say no. Dry mounting is not recommended for anything, unless you're an artist and you decide that that's the way you want to show your artwork because that's the way you really want it. Yes, but if you are collecting from other artists that didn't do that as their original artwork, I would say no, because that's kind of a more permanent system. So I would say there are many different ways to mount artwork that doesn't require like such a strong bond. And you will, as I said, if you have your space with air conditioning, it doesn't have to be great, it doesn't have to be perfect, but with air circulating, you should be fine. If you have them stored in an archival box or frame with archival materials and sealed properly, you will be good enough not to need dry bond.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay. So we have a question from Rosa. What should we do if we notice what looks like mold on a gouache artwork framed in glass? Sylvia, I think that's for you. The first thing is to check the humidity in your house. Mold spores are everywhere. They are in everything we touch. They are there.
what happens is like when the humidity is above 65, they start growing and developing. So the first thing to do is to try to move your artwork to a space where it's a little bit drier. So the mold starts going dormant again, and then you can get rid of it. You will have to talk to probably to a conservator to figure out if the problem is mold or if it's something else, maybe a chemical reaction that looks similar to mold with the painting or the paper. But the best thing to do, or the quickest thing to do if you start noticing mold, is trying to figure out if the humidity in your space is too high and start having air circulating. You can put fans around to help with that. And then maybe raising the temperature a little bit will lower the humidity a little bit too. That will help. And as I said, the first thing is to lower the humidity below, ideally below 60%, but below 65% will stop the growth of the mold. It won't get rid of it. You will have to do a cleaning, but it will stop from spreading.
What's the ideal humidity? Like what's the range that you should aim to keep your home or your where you keep your works?
Well, museums usually aim for 50%, which is not too dry, it's not too humid, but that's very hard to maintain. As Rosemary mentioned, it's not environmentally friendly. Yeah. So anything that is below 65 is okay because mold starts growing at 65%. Okay. It's hard to measure it in your own house, but if you feel sticky, like probably your humidity is pretty high. But I mean, I live here in South Florida too, and the air conditioning that normally you use to keep yourself cool is pretty good to have your artwork safe, unless you have it in a, like dark corner that is damped. Maybe that doesn't help, but as I said, you can use fans to help the air circulation.
Here's another mold question for you really quickly while we're on mold. Hi, Lilia. Lilia says, I just took a large mixed media piece out of storage and it has mold. What can I do? Try cleaning it myself or have it done professionally?
Well, depend on what the mixed media is. Usually I would say consult with the conservator. You don't have to, like sign up your firstborn to have that done. They can help you to figure out what the problem is and what your alternatives are depending on the material that your mixed media is, because some media are susceptible to solvents, some media are susceptible to water. So depending on what, like a print can withstand, like an old print can withstand water treatments. For example, you can clean it maybe with some water components, but some other media would be like wash or watercolor will be damaged with water. So you have to talk to a conservator to figure out you will know what the mixed media is, but they will tell you what's the best approach depending on the material.
And are cell sleeves okay to keep drawings in? Is that something that you would recommend?
Can you say that again?
We have from Marilena, cell, is it cell? C-E-L, cell sleeves, okay? Oh, I think she means those big sleeves that you stick the drawings in. I don't know what you call them, but how would you recommend that we store drawings that are not framed, unframed?
Rosemary mentioned before that you can put them interleaving with acid-free papers. I would recommend, there is acid-free bond paper that is sold by the roll or by the large sheets that you can cut down to the size, or that you can, if your artwork is very large, you can cut large pieces. It's not that expensive, so the best way is to keep your works on paper flat in as I said, in a cylinder acid-free box or in drawer, a file drawer, and putting interleaving with acid-free paper. There are acid-free folders too that you can buy. They are made out of cardstock. So you can also put art on, and they can be large. Some of them are like 80 by 50 inches. So those folders are acid-free, and you can put your artwork there with interleaving of acid-free paper. So there are resources out there for it, whether you have a big storage space or a small corner in your house. It's better to have them in acid-free storage boxes or furniture. Do not store them in wood cabinets, if at all possible, unless they are inside acid-free folders, because wood has a lot of acidity, and as I say, acidity transfers. So if you put a piece of paper on top of like regular wood that is not primed or protected in any way, probably over time acidity will transfer to your paper and be discolored and brittle and age, too fast.
Okay. Hi, Karen. Karen Reefus. Love you. I love her work. When rolling very large sheets of acrylic on paper, do you roll with paint on inside or outside?
Depending on also on the well, acrylic, I would say roll them with a tube inside. Don't roll them with anything inside, so it will give it support. I would say depending on the thickness of the layer, because if the layer is thick, it's less flexible. So, or if it's thin, it's more flexible. So I would say paintings, for example, that have a considerable thickness are rolled with the face out. But as I say, the important thing is to have a tube. You can also get archival tubes that are 6, 8, 10 inches wide to roll your artwork, so it is not like curl, like very, very close, but the wider the better. You can also buy a regular tube and cover it with mylar. Mylar is a polyethylene plastic that is very common everywhere. Like they are used to store photographs in sleeves. You can also buy rolls of that, cover your tube, and then roll your artwork. As I say,
so you can roll. So you can use the mylar put your artwork inside the mylar, and there's no acidity transfer or anything.
Well, your tube has to be covered with mylar, and then your artwork is to isolate the acidity of the tube. If your tube is not acid free.
Got it.
They also sell mylar sleeves that are actually great for photographs or for other works on paper, because they are inert material that is archival, and you can purchase them in photographic stores too. So that's also a good idea for photographs, to store them, and then you can put them inside an acid-free box. And the good thing about the mylar is like it's clear, so you can see your artwork all the time without having to touch it. Because also be careful on how clean your hands are when you are manipulating your artworks on paper.
I just always have those super, the white gloves. You can buy them really inexpensively on Amazon, and I just always keep a box of those around and just use them when I'm going through my many unframed artworks, because framing is so expensive that I can only frame 4 at a time. I have 4 right now at the framer that have been there for like 3 months. But I would recommend using those for us non-professionals, just to make sure that we don't damage our works.
You can also wash your hands often. and not use like lotion before you handle the artwork. So you can use your bare hands sometimes. For photographs, it's not recommended. I don't know, Rosemary, your recommendation, because anything that you put grease on, like your imprints, will etch the surface of the photograph over time.
Yeah, our hands have so much oil on them, that it definitely is. I recommend using the white gloves or washing your hands, or not touching them, on the edges too, so you don't have that smudge.
Right. I would recommend how do you say, nitrile gloves rather than cotton ones, because they
What's the material, did you say?
Transfer less.
What are they made from, Sylvia?
The plastic ones, the blue ones.
Okay. Okay, that's good. That's good to know.
Rather than cotton ones, because cotton ones are a little bit thicker, and also because your sweat or your grease, if you are using them 20 times, probably they penetrate the cotton and then get to the artwork anyway. Oh. I would recommend the other one.
No.
Museums have been moving away from cotton gloves.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Thank you for that. Let's see. Oh, from Dave again. This was just, I think you answered this for him, Rosemary. He's concerned with preserving a small collection of art books, silkscreen prints, and rare books, and he wanted you to recommend some framers, storage supply retailers, etc., who are good for this kind of preservation.
Well, I have seen even more serious book collectors than I who have wrapped books into plastic. And I'm sure it is they will wrap the whole book in, like the cover of the book, in plastic. And I'm sure it's a museum quality plastic. Maybe Sylvia knows more about this, but I mean, I think
too.
What's that?
It's probably Mylar too.
Mylar, yeah, probably Mylar. So that could help preserve, if you're handling the books a lot, that could help preserve, and then definitely the humidity issue. And, getting some air circulation into the room that you have these books in. You could also, if they are really rare and special and, maybe you don't keep them out all the time. Maybe you put them in a box, which is kind of sad, but, keep them in the dark for a little while. Keep them in your premium quality storage, which was, again, Museo Vault, which I believe has just been bought by a parent company, Uvo.
Yeah, they were bought by Uvo, yeah.
Okay, yeah, my bill name changed, so I know that.
But did your bill change?
The bill did not change, no.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Marco's framing, I put the number and the address of this recommended framer into the chat. So if there's a way, maybe we can share that with everybody somehow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I see it. Thank you. Great. Yeah, look in the chat, everyone, if you can. And there was another really good question. I know we're getting close to time, but there was a really great question here.
Can I add something to what
please.
said? She mentioned something that it's true. You can circulate your artwork on the walls. I know that we want to have all our artwork exposed, but you can circulate them in a way that they are not always exposed to light. So change them over time and let the other one rest in storage away from light exposure. So it will last longer. Light damage is not reversible, so it accumulates over time. So if you really, really love a piece of artwork that is on paper, I would recommend it to put it in storage once in a while in the dark, so it can last longer. It won't reverse the damage, but at least it will help you, last it longer. And you can, change them once in a while, so they have less light exposure.
Yes, and be conscious and about which way the light's coming into your house. If the sun in the morning is facing, sunrise is in the west, right? Well, if it's facing sun rising in the morning, it's going to get blasted with sun every day, and then it's definitely going to get faded. So just make sure you're not putting your favorite print on that wall that gets a lot of
sunlight. Yes, or any light source that is direct is not great. And as we mentioned before, when you frame it, try to frame it with UV filtering glass. Mm-hmm. So that will protect it even further. It's not a guarantee that nothing will happen, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah. So basically, I just go for the most expensive option. They always give you like all these different options, and I'm just like, just what's the most expensive one? I want that one. Yeah. But it's gonna help your work last longer in the long run. So, oh, here's a good. This was the question I was looking for. To both of you, what do I look for in terms of condition when buying artwork on paper? Ooh, stumper.
No. Do you want to go ahead, Rosemary?
No, I think that's totally your area.
That's you. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, obviously you want to buy something that is in great condition. It depends on what the issue is. If it's a tear, something that can be solved is, something that can be solved more or less easily, depending on the media that you're using. But if there is, for example, brittleness, like damage, that requires a larger treatment. Anything can be, helped with a price for a price. Obviously, the better the condition, the less you have to invest in conservation. So when you are, and there are conditions that can be not reversed but solved, and there are conditions that cannot be reversed. They can be diminished a little bit. So when you look for acquiring an artwork, condition is a big point. It's a big thing to consider. And maybe if it's something so very valuable or something that you really, really want, I would recommend you to have a collections manager or a conservator look at it and tell you more or less how much it will cost you to treat, and in order to get it like up to your standards. So yes, check condition before purchasing an artwork. Sometimes at the museum we decide not to acquire an artwork, not because it's not valuable or we are not interested in it, but because the cost of conserving it or repairing it is very high.
I just wanted to do a little time check. Oh, wow. So we're coming close to the end of our time. So I wanted to get some last thoughts or suggestions or advice, expert from your, experience as to kind of sum up our conversation here for people who may not have been here throughout the whole talk. So Sylvia, I know that you had some notes. I think we were going to either show them or talk through them. I created a poster with all these recommendations that we talked about today. Well, not all of them, but some of the most important ones that I thought will be helpful for everyone. So this poster, I think, is going to be shared on the chat, so you can download this. It's a little poster that will tell you how to prevent damage by light or how to prevent damage by humidity or by framing, and just a couple of little bit of recommendations that you can print out and keep for your own library, or you can share with other people that have some questions. What I would say as final point is that do not be afraid of collecting artwork on paper because of the environment in Miami. It is possible to have them and have them in very good condition in these areas. And we just have to be aware of what we are looking for in question of environmental conditions. So prevent it from high humidity, from light, and from our own manipulation while framing and storing, and you will have a very good collection in a very good condition. It is possible. It's great too, I think. Oh, yay! That's very encouraging, and that's what we want. We want to encourage people to buy and collect works on paper. Obviously, Oolite Arts is a great place to start if you're looking to collect works on paper. We have amazing artists there that have works that are very accessible still, and you want to get them now while you can still afford them. And, you know, I also want to just shout out Bakehouse, who also has just an amazing artist there, and also have some beautiful works available that are accessible. And there are numerous, you know, local organizations that are supporting artists, where you can buy work. So obviously we want you to support our local artists first, if you can. But please, you know, don't be afraid if you're new to South Florida, or living, this is your first time living in a very humid climate, as Sylvia and Rosemary have stated. You know, don't be afraid to collect works of paper. You just have to know the pros and the cons of what paper's lifespan is and how to care for it properly. And that's why we have our two experts here today with some advice. If you have any questions, I don't know, can we drop maybe some information as to where people can get more like help? Oh, we are. Jessica's awesome. Jessica, thank you. On the YouTube chat, she's so good. So on the YouTube chat, yes, we're going to have more information for you guys about more resources for you to help your acquisitions of works on paper and care and storage of works on paper. So I think, are we wrapping up, or do we have a little bit more time for more questions? Somebody cue me? Okay. All right. Let's wrap up. We're wrapping up. All right. Well, thank you so much to Sylvia and Rosemary. I like Rosemary because my name's Donnamarie. It just flows out a lot faster, but Rose, they're both beautiful. I want to thank you both for being here. I want to thank, obviously, Oolite Arts and for having us and for allowing me to moderate this conversation today. It's been so informative, and I took a lot of notes. I already had a lot of notes because I wanted to make sure that I made these women look good, but I also took a lot of notes, so this has been really great for me. And to everyone that's watching, thank you so much for spending some of your time with us and for asking all these phenomenal questions. I mean, there were some really great questions, and you can always refer back to our YouTube channel and catch any of our past Oolite Collects talks. And if there was anything that you missed in this talk, you can always watch it again. So that's the beauty of online. Thank you. Thank you all so much. And I think that we are signing off. I'm not sure. But I'm Donnamarie Baptiste. Again, thank you. Our guests today were Rosemary Cromwell and Sylvia Manrique for Oolite Collect. Thank you.